Welcome, my dear students, to another week of Biology with Mr. Miguel. This week we will be discussing photosynthesis. The objectives for this week are the following. However, we will start by breaking down the word photosynthesis and explaining a little bit of what it does. When you hear photosynthesis, I want you to remember that photosynthesis is not some mystical word that came to be and invented by scientists. It actually exists in many other words. Let's take a minute and break down the word photosynthesis. Let's look at the Greek word photo. Photo, anytime you see a word that says photo, I want you to remember that photo refers to light. That's what it means. When you see the word synthesis, it means to create or to build or to join. So photosynthesis can be defined as a process in which organisms use light to join chemicals to form food molecules. I want you to think about it this way. Photosynthesis is grabbing the light that comes from the sun, transforming it into a substance that other organisms can consume and obtain energy. Humans cannot obtain energy from the sun, therefore they rely on plants and the products by plants in order to survive. That's more or less what photosynthesis is. And what happens in photosynthesis? We heard that light is captured, but that is not as simple as it sounds. Yes, photosynthesis uses light, but it does not use just any light. It uses specific wavelengths of light. You see in the image, you can see there is a beam of white light being shown through the prism. This is known as a prism. And the prism, what it does is that it separates light into its different components. That means that light is made out of different colors. Just the same way you are able to see the rainbow, or when you have a water hose spraying and it's separated into different colors, those are the colors of light, and they're known as the wavelengths of light. So those are wavelengths of light. And there's different wavelengths. Each wavelength corresponds to one color. Does that make sense? And in plants, they're able to observe red. So they're able to observe the red. They're able to observe orange, yellow. Then we see blue, indigo, and violet. What, you missed green? No, I did not miss green. It just means that plants are unable to effectively capture green light. And because they're unable to effectively capture green light, what happens is that when light comes, all the other wavelengths, all the other colors are absorbed by the leaf. And which color gets reflected? Reflected means that it gets bounced back, is green. And that's why plants would appear green, because they reflect green wavelengths, which essentially make the plant look green. They're bouncing the green, they can't absorb the green. Anything that it absorbs, it does not bounce back. That's what I need you to remember. Let me show you a better illustration. Inside of plants, we have little organelles that we know as chloroplasts. And from the diagram, you're able to see that there is a light and here is the chloroplast. This whole structure here is the chloroplast. Inside of chloroplast, we have further subdivisions, other parts. That means the chloroplast is made out of different components. So the chloroplast is found on the cell is found on the leaf is found on the plant. That is ordered complexity. you see that the light is white light. But once it reaches the thylakoids would be this little coin looking thing. Once it reaches the thylakoids, inside of the thylakoids there are pigments. And pigments are like little dots. And those dots are the actual light absorbing component of the chloroplast. That means that these pigments, they're pigments on the thylakoid. And those pigments are the ones that will absorb the light. But will they absorb just any light? No. Different pigments, there is not only one pigment, there's different pigments. For example, we have carotene, which is the pigment that makes some leaves look orange, especially in North America when they have autumn season or fall season. The plant would look orange because the pigment would be carotene. Here in the tropics we have a lot of green plants, and those green plants would contain this pigment that is called chlorophyll, and chlorophyll looks green. We also have xanthophylls, which some algae have, and those xanthophylls look golden. Now let me clear up something for you. Why will chlorophyll look green? That's because it cannot absorb the green. Why do xanthophylls look golden? That's because the xanthophylls cannot absorb the golden color. What about carotenes? Why do they look orange? That's because they cannot absorb the orange color. So here, just to give you a little thing that you remember, carrot, what the color is the carrot? Carrots are orange. So they bounce back the orange wavelengths. This means that they absorb the other wavelengths. Does that make sense? Another way to see it is that whatever you don't eat, you throw away. The same thing with these pigments. Whatever they cannot absorb, they bounce it back into the environment, into the atmosphere. And that's why they look certain colors. Let's look at our next objective. It's to describe what type of reaction photosynthesis is and state the balanced equation. It all boils down to this. If you don't learn anything from this session, I at least need you to remember this equation. We know that in photosynthesis, light is used to produce food, but not only light is used in the whole equation. We also have carbon dioxide. We know that plants absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they suck water through their roots into the plant. So they join the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and the water found in soil. That's why we water the plant, so that they can get water. And when they join under the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, they form something known as glucose, which is a type of sugar, a simple sugar, a monosaccharide. And on top of producing the sugar, they also produce oxygen. So we know that plants also produce oxygen. It's something that we have been taught since primary school. But now it is just time to step it up a little bit and understand clearly how this is done. We know that carbon dioxide, 6 carbon dioxide to be specific, carbon dioxide molecules join to 6 water molecules to produce a single glucose molecule and 6 oxygen molecules. And this would be known as the balanced equation. And you might be asking, Mister, where do all of this come from? This is what I will talk about in the next slide. As you will see in this slide, the first thing that needs to be present would be the energy. And once energy is present, photosynthesis can occur in the plant Once the carbon dioxide is present, where will the carbon dioxide come from? It will come from the atmosphere. All around us, we have carbon dioxide. It will also take water, and this water would normally come from plants' roots. So from the roots in plants, that's where the water would come from. And then we would have glucose being produced and oxygen being produced. I also want you to know that photosynthesis is an endergonic process. What does this mean? Endergonic. When you see the little prefix end, it refers to in. So that means that energy from the surrounding is captured and put into the molecules, and in the specific molecule, glucose. So photosynthesis takes the energy from the environment and puts it into a chemical. Since we're speaking about reactions, I want you to know that photosynthesis occurs in two major stages: the light reaction and the dark reaction. Oh, mister, what are you talking about? It means basically this. When sunlight is present, as you can see here, that's the light reaction. But what exactly happens in the light reaction? What happens in the light reaction is that one water molecule, the water molecule would look like this. So this is an oxygen, and water molecule is, they look like the diagram I'm showing you. And this is what you know as H2O. Why is it known as H2? Why does water look like H2? That's because there's two hydrogen. So we put two hydrogen. So H2, that means two hydrogen, and one oxygen in the middle. Now, in the light reaction, this is what happens. The sunlight, the waves from the sun, come and break the bonds between the hydrogen and the oxygen. Same thing happens here. So what this does is that it releases oxygen and it releases hydrogen. And because of this, we end up with oxygen is free and hydrogen is free. So all the water that is being taken in by the plant is being broken down by sunlight. And it has to go through chlorophyll. Because even if you have an axe and you try to break down the water, it will be very, very difficult to even think. Even if you boil it to 1,000 degrees, you would still be unable to break down the bonds between the oxygen. But it happens in the plants, and the plants just break down the water molecule into individual hydrogen, individual oxygens. And that is known as the light reaction or light dependent reactions. In the other hand, we have the dark reactions. What happens in the dark reactions? We know that water is broken down in the light reactions, but what happens in the dark reaction? Does it happen at night? Not necessarily. By dark reaction, it means that it can function even if there is no light. It can continue going on. Light reaction, can they happen in the absence of light? Definitely not. So we have in the dark reactions, or light independent reaction, that means that they don't need light. We have that oxygen, those hydrogen, and the carbon dioxide coming in from the atmosphere being joined together, and they form a substance known as it's a 3-carbon molecule that we refer as G3P. I'm not gonna go into the specifics, and that's what happens in the dark reaction. Let's go into our third objective. Our third objective is to figure out where does water and carbon dioxide come from. Let's look at the diagram. This diagram clearly shows exactly where everything comes from. We see here the energy comes from the sun. What else enters from the atmosphere? We have carbon dioxide coming from the atmosphere, so you have little particles in the atmosphere that are known as carbon dioxide, and they come into the plant. How exactly do they come into the plant? Well, you see, the leaf is amazing because it has various parts that allow and regulate when and how much carbon dioxide can enter the plant. I'll show you in a little bit, just be patient. So carbon dioxide is coming from the atmosphere through the leaves, then water is being absorbed from the ground through the vascular bundles in the plant. That means the xylem conducts the water all the way to the leaves. Then you have sunlight coming and breaking down that water. And what is released, we have, after the light and dark reactions, we have oxygen being released into the atmosphere and sugar being produced. More specifically, we would have glucose being produced, which would be written like this. That would be glucose. Sometimes glucose and glucose are joined together and they form different substances like starch, cellulose, sucrose in cane, like sugar cane that we use to produce sugar. It's sucrose content that we are concerned with. And what is sucrose? Why is it sweet? It's a sugar. What type of sugar? It's a glucose and a fructose joined together to form a sucrose. And you will learn a little bit more about that later on. And this is where everything comes from. So whatever light is absorbed from the sun is deposited into the glucose. That's why it is known as an endergonic reaction. So here you go. I told you that we were going to look at the leaf. This is the cross-section of a leaf. This is how a leaf would normally look like. We have the cuticle, and the cuticle is the surface of the leaf, and if you notice, it tends to be shiny and waxy. What this does is that it prevents this leaf from dehydrating, from going dry, from water from evaporating. Why? Because the wax is a hydrophobic substance. Hydrophobic means that it's water repelling, so it's waterproof. Also, there is a layer of cells. Now, this is how I would normally say that if we could zoom in into the leaf in this way, you should be able to see that at the top there is an upper epidermis, which is a layer of cells which is constantly replenishing the cuticle, means it maintains the cuticle. Also, below the upper epidermis, we would have the mesophyll cells. Meso means middle. Meso, whenever you hear the word meso, it refers to the middle layer. So the mesophyll cells would have photosynthetic cells. This means these are the cells that actually carry about photosynthesis. And it also has a lower epidermis, which serves to provide a layer that protects the mesophyll. It also has, inside of cells, we have chloroplasts. And one of the most important structure that the leaf has in terms of allowing carbon dioxide to enter is the stomata, which would be this region right here. What the stomata does is that it opens and closes depending on the plant's need for carbon dioxide or the preservation of water. On a very hot day, what would happen? Will the stomata be open or closed? On a very hot day, the stomata would close. Why will the stomata close? so that water from inside is not lost from evapotranspiration. That's why it would close. When the weather is fair and the plant needs carbon dioxide, what does the stomata do? The stomata has some cells known as guard cells, porque sirven como guardias. They open up and close the stomata. So why does the stomata open and close? It closes to prevent water from evaporating. It also opens in order to allow carbon dioxide to enter. Then we have the vascular bundle. And the vascular bundle is like the veins that you're able to see from the leaf. If I cut this leaf and you're able to see a very, very thin hair-like structure right here, that is a vascular bundle. That means that it's like the highway in the plant through which all the material is exchanged, and it is composed of the phloem and xylem. And this serves to carry the water from the roots way onto the leaves, and the sugars produced in the leaves into the rest of the plant. That's why some plants have very, very fleshy fruits, because all the sugars are produced in the leaf, but then are transported out of the leaf into the fruit. This is a summary of photosynthesis. And I want you to note something. Photosynthesis is the opposite of cellular respiration. Photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast, while cellular respiration happens in the mitochondria. Photosynthesis produces sugar and oxygen, while the mitochondria uses sugar and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. It's like they're opposite of each other. And the whole process goes in a cycle. Let's look at our fourth objective, which is to annotate the structure of a chloroplast, specifically looking at the thylakoids. What is he talking about? So this is how a chloroplast would look like. The cell would look like this would be the cell. You would have the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum. You would have all the structures of a normal cell. Inside of that plant cell, we would have the chloroplast, which is the photosynthetic organelle of the cell. And the chloroplast has an outer membrane. That means that it has a layer that protects it. It has an inner membrane. It has these tiny structures that look like biscuits. And let me just outline it. It looks like a stack of coins. If you put coins together, that's how the thylakoids look like. One specific coin would be the thylakoid. If you put it all together, if you put all the thylakoids together, they would be known as the grana. And the liquid that surrounds the thylakoids, it's not very evident here, but there is a liquid that is inside of the chloroplast that's known as the stroma. This is how a normal chloroplast would look like. But the functional part of the chloroplast would be the thylakoid. The thylakoid is where all the action would be occurring. The thylakoid and the outside, it's constantly working to produce sugars and using sunlight to break down the water. So this is ongoing the whole day. Let's look at a summary here of the reactions. So in here we know that in the light reaction we have water going in and oxygen going out. So oxygen goes out once we also have this structure which we call, not the structure, this process which we call the light independent reaction. And that one is also known as the Calvin cycle. We will not go into the details, but what I want you to see here is that it is in the thylakoid that water is being broken down to make the oxygen and the hydrogen free. But it is in the stroma, which is the liquid component, that the rest of the reaction is going on. Now let us look at the final aspect of our lesson today. We need to compare photosynthesis with cellular respiration. And here we go. I want you to think of photosynthesis as the process that produces oxygen and glucose. I want you to think of cellular respiration of the process that produces energy and carbon dioxide and water. Now here is the trick. You see, the plant is constantly producing carbon dioxide, but it's not constantly producing energy for its usage. So they're different. Any energy that needs to be produced is done in the mitochondria. Even though the plant is producing the energy, it's storing it away. So let me give you an analogy in the next slide. So let's read it together. Photosynthesis is like going to the grocery store and buying food to store on your cupboard or your pantry. The food that you buy has energy inside and you are storing it. That's what photosynthesis is doing. It's storing that energy. Once that energy needs to be used, cellular respiration is like eating the food when you are hungry and need energy. The energy in the food is released only by eating the food, and that is cellular respiration. It is breaking down the food that has been produced in photosynthesis in order to supply the cell with energy. So don't think that photosynthesis is directly supplying energy to the cell. No, it is the mitochondria carrying out cellular respiration. That is more or less the end of our class. Thank you very much for your attention.